Hey, what's up, guys? Keith Underwood here, creator, writer, and producer of Califia and the Timeless Sentries. And we have for you this evening, let's see here, actor, voice actor, director, and all around great guy, Mr. JB Blanc. How you doing, JB?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So let's see here. We will know you from Barry on HBO, also Apex Legends, and then
That's
you're
right.
also a regular director for Blizzard, and you're also a performer for Blizzard, correct?
That's right. Yeah, I've been doing
Okay.
voices for Blizzard since about 16 years ago.
Oh, wow. Break down some of the characters that you've done for them and some of the
Oh
projects
my
that you
goodness, you
directed.
can't even remember. They're all, it's like this orc and that elf and that, that Murloc. I mean, I've played Murlocs, which are Murlocs are kind of fish creatures and they talk like that.
Right,
Lots of bad guys. With the big booming voice, you get to play a lot of big monsters and bad guys.
right.
I'm Caustic in Apex Legends and Braum in League of Legends.
Very cool.
And yeah, so I'm a lucky man. I've managed to run the gamut, and I was lucky enough to be on things like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul
That's
on
right.
American television as well.
That's very cool. So you were born in Paris and then
Yeah,
moved to England, and then I guess you kind of started your career in England.
yeah.
Yes. So what was it like, coming up in Western Europe?
It was an interesting time. I mean, I was sort of bridged the end of the Thatcher era, which was akin to your Reagan era.
Hmm.
Things were changing rather radically. Individualism came up, and the arts were kind of sort of put on a back burner. But I came from a kind of unconventional background. I was in a British boarding school, which wasn't really a place that birthed many actors. But I had, it's
Mm,
funny in those kind of official institutions or very establishment institutions, you often have these quite left wing teachers who told me that it was possible to be an actor. I didn't know you could do that as a job. And once I
wow.
found that out, I was kind of hooked. I was doing plays at school and stuff. And then I really hadn't heard of institutions like I'd heard of RADA, but I hadn't heard of other drama schools. And when that became a possibility, I just kind of rang around all the drama schools, and I managed to get a cancellation on the last day of auditions. And before I knew it, I was headed there. I'd done a stint at the National Youth Theatre, which was a great organisation for much younger actors to be able to go and spend time away from home in Manchester or London. I was in London at the tender age of 16, facing the big back city. Bearing in mind, I grew up in a tiny village of 300 or 400 people.
Wow.
Um,
That's small.
yeah, very small and
That's
very, very old world up in Yorkshire. I mean, the old folks still said thee and thou when I grew up. So that when I came
wow.
home from college, they'd say, "Oh, there's been to that London, has there?" Um,
That's the size of a Los Angeles classroom.
yeah, yes, it
Yeah,
is. Yeah,
that's really
yeah, and we still had
small.
two pubs and a shop.
Right. Well, we got to get the drinking in, right? You froze up for a second there. Let's see if we get him back. There you are, JB.
Here I am.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
you froze up for a quick sec.
they all right. You grew up on beer in Yorkshire.
Right. So what do you miss? Because you're in the States now.
Yeah,
Yeah. So what do you miss most about England?
my friends. The
Mm,
friends, the sense of humor you share with them, the close group of friends that I had to leave behind. It was a big adventure coming here, and I'd been doing theatre, nothing but theatre, for many years, and then an opportunity came up to do this film, The Count of Monte Cristo, and I knew it wasn't going to do great guns in Europe, and I knew it was going to be bigger in America. And the director, Kevin Reynolds, said, "I think you'll do well in Los Angeles. You should come and have a look." I didn't really have anything holding me back. I'd done 10 or so plus years of theatre. I was at one time I was 3.5, 4 years at the National Theatre in London. It was very difficult to make a living, and so I came and sniffing opportunity like most people do, and of course arrived here and had to kind of start from scratch. because
Wow.
no one really knew anything of the theatre that I'd done.
Right.
The movie came out, but also I also got here 10 days before 9/11 happened, so that
Wow.
changed everything as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
And here we are in
yeah,
another crisis
yeah. So
now.
it was a,
So,
uh, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. A page turned when that happened. A page turned, and I'd come to America a few times as a kid, and I loved America, and I loved the yes culture that America represented to me.
Mm,
And I think often England had felt like a no culture. You come up with an idea, and people kind of put seven obstacles in your way, and a load of bureaucracy and problems. And in America, everyone says, "Well, oh yeah, you should talk to Steve. He works in that industry, and he can talk to so and so, and maybe you can get it." And it's always very positive, and I really enjoyed that yes culture. But it was a grind to start with. It was tough. The reason I got into voiceover was that I just heard they were looking for British voices in a dub of a Japanese anime called Helsing,
wow.
and that got me my start in voiceover, which I'd never really done in the UK. So I only really did voiceover when I moved here, and that was nearly 20 years ago now.
Wow. What do you miss least about England?
Negativity in the weather.
That that
The
is
weather sucks.
that is a big deal. It's like it's overcast all the time and always a little
It can be.
dim.
It's the late winter months. It's like February, March, January, February, March, April, after the holidays, and it's just, and as a kid, I remember we used to get pretty cold, winters with snow, and it just turned into drizzle day
Right.
on day. And those, the fun snow days were gone, and and that's a grind. It's tough. It was a tough place. It's also a tough place as an actor. It's very theatre
Mm,
based, and a lot of the television casting is very cliquey. It's very, casting directors get their favorites and they kind of stick to their favorites. Whereas when I arrived in America, I quickly realized it was an industry, and that you were a marketable proposition. I happened to look like someone who ought to be stopped in the airport a lot, and could do dialects and could do dialects. So I ended up having a very diverse casting opportunity, which I was very blessed to. I used to think it was a disadvantage, and I came here and I discovered it really was an advantage, and that when casting people looked at me, they did not think Brit. They thought anything
mm,
but. So I ended up playing a lot more Americans, uh, um, Arabs, Israelis, Russians,
right.
Mexican doctor, all kinds of different. So I was very lucky to get an opportunity to play lots of different stuff.
Yes. Let me hear a general American accent, JB.
Oh, come on, man! You can't do that to me.
Come
I'll try. I
on.
mean, it's just you take it. I mean, uh, I can. I mean, I'm not a performing seal, but I'll try. The thing about I always describe it as, in England, if you have a British accent, you have an egg on its end at the back of your mouth, so it's standing up. Everything's very up and down. And
Right.
I used to be a dialect coach, so if you take that egg and you turn it on its side, everything kind of flattens out, and you get an American accent. And then you can get everything from New York to the kind of big bold Louisiana kind of roundness. You can get Texas, which is much more kind of thin and a little more forward. And then by the time you get to California, man, it's too hot. I'm going to the beach. There's just nothing, man. You go further west you go, the further it kind of just flattens out into almost nothing.
Right. Is it, I've heard that it's easier if you're from England to do a Southern accent. Is that true?
I think the South. Well, here's the problem: is a lot of British actors, if they make a mistake, and I've trained a lot of them, and some of them very big. I was a dialect coach for many years. Um, an English instinct is often to kind of do this kind of cowboy accent that kind of gets very drawn out and is almost Appalachian and kind of weird. Or they do the Italian American kind of James Gandolfini thing. I got ducks in my pool. What am I going to do?
Right.
But those are very distinct things that people can hear, and I think that some of the subtleties and the vagaries of an American accent can be kind of a bit mystifying. But in general, it is easier. For a start, we grew up in a place where accents change very quickly over very small distances. So I grew up in a small village in Yorkshire. They have a different accent in Harrogate, and 20 miles away, they have a different accent in York and a different accent in Leeds, which is they're all 20 miles apart. and then in Manchester, which is not much further away, it's a
Right.
very different sound indeed. And near,
Yes.
just a bit south of there, and you got Birmingham, which is a completely different sound altogether. Or you've
Right.
got your friends in Liverpool who talk like that, and so they're all very close together, but they all sound very different.
Right.
And a few miles up the road from me is Newcastle, which has an almost unintelligible accent, like, man, what are you talking about? It's very different sound indeed. So we get used to that, and also we hear a lot of American accents because we're listening to American. We watch a lot of American television, but also physically, a Brit is relaxing into an American accent. For an
Mm,
American to do a British accent, they're having to reach up and arch up into sounds that they never really use normally.
right.
And so it's the whole muscularity inside the mouth has into the inside of the mouth has to completely change.
That's really interesting, and there is definitely a technique, to what you do, as opposed to some people just saying that I'm just going to put, something on. There's some thought to it, which is why I think that you're so good at what you do.
For me, it's an intrinsic part of character, and I think it's not something that you just throw on top. It has to be inherent, and I think for me, it's dialect has been one of the things that helps you find the key to a character. And it's not just about accent; it's about geography and culture. And
Hmm.
Russians are very into the pain of the mother country and the long suffering that country's gone through. So a Russian, will say, "Please, can you pass me the salt?"
You can
It's
hear
a very
it.
simple thing, but it sounds like all the pain in the world is in there.
Heavy. It's
It's
heavy.
very heavy.
Yes, that's very
Um,
true. I never thought about that. That's very true, though.
but there are accents in the north of England, like Sheffield, where it sounds like a wet cloth hitting a street, because that's what it sounds like. It's damp and it's wet and it just has that kind of sense of landing very heavily. Whereas London is a bit more, you've got to be a bit sparky in London. You've got to look around and watch your back. You never know who's behind you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's so it's things are very very but it's the same here. In New York you speak quickly. It's colder. You want to get some coffee? Let's get out of here. It's a whole different perspective. And part of the southern accent is, also I say southern accent. There are many southern accents, but
Absolutely.
that kind of drawl is just because of the heat and how it's just harder to move through humid air than it is to move through clean northeastern air. And also, there's a lot of that kind of hangover from the Brits too. That the Southerners were more akin to those good old slave-owning Brits who had
That's
come
right.
over.
Yes.
And so, culturally, America is it's such a fascinating place in terms of, we're a melting pot in England, but it goes back 1,000 years, and in America it goes back a couple of 100 years, 200 or 300 years.
Right.
But the melting pot is still just as intense, and it's almost like America's population has evolved faster than its white population could, and so they just
Absolutely.
don't realize. And so, I was married to a black woman. I have a biracial daughter.
Mhm.
That history is extremely recent, and I think most white people just don't understand, because you get that kind of, well, I wasn't involved, and therefore, what's the
Mm.
big fuss about? Well, it's pure ignorance. People, I mean, I was witness to being married to a black woman in America. I was witness to my ex-wife grew up bouncing on Maya Angelou's knee. Her parents were very
Wow.
heavily involved in the movement. They were both professors in Lawrence, Kansas. Her cousin was Julian Bond,
Wow.
who was leader of the NAACP.
Right.
So it's very, very, and I got insight into a whole side of America that most white people probably don't. And then I got to see firsthand just how insidious and present racism is here, and mostly through just plain old ignorance. I mean, there's a reason why people in urban areas vote Democrat, because they're
Mm.
next to their neighbors and they're around gay people and transgender
Right.
people and black people and brown people and yellow people and whatever it might be, but because it's exposure. There
Right.
is nothing to fear,
It makes you more empathetic.
and that fear is the big destruction. I mean, that's the thing that causes the downfall of it all. Fear and ignorance, and that's something that as I spent more time here, brought me a great sadness about what was otherwise a very positive experience.
Hmm. What how important is it for you to convey some of those messages that you talked about through your work?
Um, I mean, I think it's very important. I mean, I don't understand right-wing actors. I don't get it because wherever you come from as an actor, people write drama about the underclass. They write drama about the
Mm,
struggle. They
mm,
write a drama about people who have to fight for something. And I find it hard to believe and upsetting to believe that the only reason people become right wing is because they want to protect their pocketbook and not pay
mm.
taxes. I mean, and sadly, that's what it comes down to.
Right.
Well, I was just built differently. I think, yeah, I think if you're successful, you should pay more taxes. And you know, the argument of, well, I'm not paying for some poor black kid's healthcare. What do you think car insurance is? You're paying for people who crash cars. That's how insurance works. That's how healthcare works. Of course it does. That's what it is.
Right.
And the way we have it now, we're putting money in the pockets of people who do nothing to earn it. These middlemen insurance people, and it's very sad to me that most of the population doesn't realize that that's what's going on. It was very interesting. I was listening to Winston Marsalis talk about this, and he said people have got to
The
stop talking.
musician for the young folks that might not know.
Yes, he's a very famous
Yes.
jazz musician, and he's from New Orleans, but he currently
Yes.
lives in New York, and a brilliant, brilliant man, and a
Absolutely.
brilliant brain too.
Yes.
A great man on the civil rights subject. He's very, very, very astute. And he said, poor whites have got to stop blaming blacks for their problems because you're all in the same boat. Stop making it about race and start talking about the pocketbook
Mm,
because it's the man with his hands in the till, in the cash register. He's the one you should be both, excuse me, you should be both uniting against. You're in the same boat, and the problem is, I think, for a lot of poor whites, they desperately need a victim, and so it turns into race because it's easily identifiable. But it's largely unforgivable. You are the same people. It's the old adage, crack a white egg and a brown egg. They're both got a yellow yolk inside.
mm.
And children are not born racist. It's a condition that's applied to them.
Right.
And so,
Absolutely.
I think that's very, as a father of a black daughter, that's very important to me. I've witnessed my ex-wife and her mother, who grew up without wearing shoes until she was 13 in a
Mm,
poor black township outside of Beaumont, Texas, who benefited from a kind white woman who said, "You're a smart kid, and I'm going to pay for your education," and then became the dean of college systems in St. Louis and and in Champaign-Urbana, and
mhm.
it became a very important voice in the community. And so, what I see happening, and when someone like our delightful orange friend comes on the scene and legitimizes that kind of viewpoint, yeah, I'm going to fight because it's my kid who's going to be affected. And if I can have any, it's part of what attracted me to your project was, I talked to Aaron about it, and that's the
Aaron
sort of thing I want.
Fitzgerald.
Yeah, I want to be involved in. I've
Yes.
just directed a 12-part dramatized podcast, effectively a radio play. That's what they call them nowadays.
Right.
And our lead actress she's the lead character is the daughter of the first black female Speaker of the House.
Mm,
She's the lead in the series. It's a company that's very committed to diversity. I did an animated project of the Black Panther that was
mhm.
produced by Reggie Hudlin
Yes.
that I felt very drawn to because I was like, where are the black superheroes? What until that film came out, it was obscurity.
Hmm.
And was very emotionally affected by that film because of my daughter being able to see those strong female roles that looked like her. I mean, and the fact that we now have Kamala Harris. If
Mm.
we don't have a military coup, who will be the first, black female and Indian American
Yes.
vice president and hopefully president one day?
Right.
Is that's the country I want my kid to see, and so I it's becoming. I hope it doesn't become a cliche because I think it's a message that all people need to hear, is that racism is not a black issue, it is a white issue, and
Right.
the same way that sexism is not a misogyny is not a female issue, it is a male issue. And I think that's what we've got to wrap our heads around if we're going to move forward at all. You know.
That's right. That's right. I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you said, and it's just going to be nice to see. You know, you mentioned Califia in the Timeless Centuries, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later. But you know, it's important for us to talk about it now. Is that the whole purpose of having so many different characters from so many different backgrounds is to really show that even though people can come from different places and they can have different viewpoints, what they can achieve when they come together, you know, and not only for themselves, but for other people.
Of course,
Hmm.
of course. I mean, I don't see us surviving without that, to be honest.
That's right.
And other countries manage it somehow. I mean, if you look at India, India has, I mean, there are 100 different religions, and they've all
Right.
managed to come under the same roof with different skin colors and different caste systems. And okay, that system still exists, but somehow it coexists in a relatively peaceful way. And I didn't think about race at all in the same way in England as I did when I came to America. You know, in England, we see blacks represented on television as mayors and
Absolutely.
governors and presidents. But
Right.
it's a myth when you get, you know, or
Right.
it was for a long time.
Right.
And, you know, I've had black friends from London come here and say, is LA segregated? And I've said, kinda.
Right.
And that shocks me to think that. But I mean, in England, in London, certainly, we all drink in the same bars. You don't give it a second thought. It's not. We're all in the city together, not even really considering it. Have we had our race issues in the past? Absolutely.
Right.
But a lot of those, you know, like the Brixton riots in '84, they were
Yeah.
started by the British police. It was you know, they lit the touch paper and
Hmm.
set it off because that's politically viable for them.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I've witnessed coexistence being possible, and there's no reason why it can't be here. But it's going to take whites to understand that this is people's recent history. I mean, my ex-wife's mother lost a sister in a lynching. I mean,
Wow.
that's not historic. That's yesterday. You know, that's very very tangible to her, and so. It's not enough for people to say, well, I wasn't involved. That doesn't work. Sorry.
Mhm.
It doesn't work. We all have a responsibility. And I think,
Absolutely.
you know, we, as the white population of America, really have a huge responsibility.
Right. What are you, you know, since we talked about television a little bit, and I agree, I do, I watch a lot of BBC, BBC America, for that very reason. You know, I just, you know, I mean, you just see so many types of families and so many blending, you know, of families and done effortlessly, you know, which is very interesting to me. I'm currently watching, which I think is BBC America, Temple.
Uh huh.
Yes, with Mark Strong. It's just
Hmm.
it's an amazing, amazing show, and it just kind of
I've worked with
continues.
Mark. Yeah, he's a phenomenal actor.
Yes, and it kind of continues that legacy. So, are you watching any BBC TV or any BBC American? What do you like?
It's so hard for me to watch anything right now. It's so difficult.
Oh, right, right, right.
But I just don't have time. Um, the latest thing I watched was the Queen's Gambit because it's a fascinating
Oh,
show
right, right. On
about chess, which
Netflix.
I thoroughly enjoyed. Yeah, Netflix.
Yes.
Um, as and when I can, I do. But I mean, I grew up on a lot of that stuff, and it always felt very inclusive. It wasn't extraordinary to have a black character represented very strongly in a
Right,
lead. It wasn't, you know. I know America's flipped out for shows like Luther and
right.
you know,
Which is
but
excellent.
that's
Yeah.
excellent stuff.
Yes.
And but you know, you guys had The Wire, which was a great, you know, that was a big step forward.
Absolutely.
Um, you know, and so it's out there. It can happen.
Mhm.
But I don't. It's not that side. It's not the largely liberal arts side that I'm worried about. You know,
It's the
it's the
political
rest of the
side.
folks. It's the
Yeah.
rest of the folks. You know, because and it's funny because they'll watch the shows and they'll enjoy the shows. You know, there's good drama is good drama. It doesn't matter what colors represented on screen. It's just good.
Right.
It's how that translates into real life. You know.
Right.
I do enjoy British drama. I mean, we you know we're beautifully cynical in England. we're not afraid of gritty, dark stories, and I think the explosion of non-network television has
Mm,
helped with that here. I think it's people,
absolutely.
there's money there for shows to be made that wouldn't have been made before,
Hmm.
and I think that's been a very positive thing. It hasn't necessarily reflected well for actors because the season, or for writers because the seasons are much shorter. They'll tend to just buy 7 or 8 episodes,
Right,
whereas it used to be 13 or 22.
right,
And it would be a pilot season used to be a big thing, and it's not really anymore. And
right.
the industry has changed radically, and it's interesting for me that my career has kind of moved much more towards. I mean, I'm lucky I got involved in the gaming industry, and games want to be movies, and movies want to be games, and so there is now a lot more crossover of that stuff.
Right.
But it has changed rather radically, that industry, and some of it for the better, and some of it not.
Right. I actually prefer the shorter, season format because you usually get better quality,
Yes,
because you can invest
quality over
more into
quantity.
it. And I hate fluff episodes, it's just, purely to drive advertising. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
so
frustrating. And also, just when things get a little too saccharine, I don't want to be spoon fed. I don't want to be told what to think by a show. I want a show to ignite me to make an opinion. The same way I feel about a play. I mean, it's why I loved theatre so much, is that plays aren't often wrapped up nice and neatly in packages.
right.
That you want to walk out with something to think about, something that's going to you do that job of drama, which is holding a mirror up to society and saying, look, this is what you are. How do you feel about that? Which is what great drama does.
Yeah.
And I think you can achieve that in a shorter package. There's also the question of our attention spans as human beings ever shrinking.
Mm,
But I think you can do that there's money around to be able to do that in a very high impact and way in the short term, in less long kind of windy ways.
right. Well, it's interesting that you said that because, you started your own theater company, right?
Not on my own, with many other people. But yes, when I left the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, it was 1990.
Hmm.
Yes, folks, I'm that old. I know I don't look it, but I'm that old.
Not at all.
Not at all, not a bit. It's the
Not
same
at
as
all.
very similar to yourself, Keith. Yeah,
Right.
very clearly two young men just having a chat.
Absolutely.
Um, there was a Thatcher had basically caused us a global recession. Individualism and industry individualism was on the rise. The industry was being killed. Manufacturing was being killed. Everything was being outsourced, and the arts suffered pretty heavily. And there wasn't really a venue. There was an old repertory system. The theatre, for those of you would come out of drama school and you'd go into a theatre company and you would roll shows every few weeks. So you'd work on 3 shows at once and rotate them. And you could do that at any of a number of theatres all over the country. And that was kind of dying, and they were suffering from funding. And some friends of mine from RADA and from Lambda, another drama school, they wanted to set up a theatre company for kids who'd recently left drama school, so they had somewhere to work.
Nice.
So we got a basement in a block of flats in Paddington. We painted it black. We begged, borrowed, whatever we could. Borrowed and begged, made our own costumes. We put up
There's
lighting
a
rigs.
third part to that, right,
But
JB?
yes, yeah, we
I
didn't
think
steal anything. That's why I held back from that. We didn't steal anything. Um, yeah, but that's when you do that stuff, you slightly feel like you're getting away with something because people are generous and they do. We got an enormous amount of help from Emma Thompson and Kenneth Branagh actually, which
Wow.
meant a lot.
That's very cool.
Um, they gave us a bunch of money to get kicked off, and we just started putting shows on. Um, and I wasn't making any money. I was dirt poor to the extent that I slept at the theatre quite a lot, and at one time. Even worse than that, when I was evicted. But I had this. I developed this real passion for what I was doing, and I know it's an old cliche. I mean, we were literally eating rice and had holes in our boots and were smoking single strand roll up cigarettes surreptitiously. But God, we were happy, and we were producing really good art. And I was very lucky. We were part of a theatre company that got compared to Theatre de Complicité, which is a very famous company. We were doing physical theatre and quite avant-garde theatre.
Right.
And one of my mates from RADA had decided that he wasn't going to work. He wasn't going to work as an actor anymore. He wanted to direct, and he directed the first show that we did there. And honestly, we were so flat broke. he now is a gentleman. He was always called Rufus Norris, and he now runs. He's the artistic director of the Royal National Theatre,
That's
so,
amazing.
which is
Yeah,
extraordinary.
that is
Um,
absolutely amazing.
from humble beginnings, and but what that does is, if you're not doing it for, you're certainly not doing it for the money. You can only be doing it for the love. You're
Right.
in a position where you're really open to learning, and I think what's hard for me when I teach young actors and I meet young actors is that they want the instant solution. They want the shortcut, as do a lot of kids these days, because everything is so immediately available to them information-wise. Information is easily available. Hard work is irreplaceable. And there is no really, they all want to know what the short, how did you break into this inner circle of voice actors who work all the time? What's the secret? And I say, come close.
Right.
There's no secret. I'm with Floyd Mayweather on this. It's hard work and dedication. That's it.
That's right.
But if you have that commitment, and if that's what it's about for you, I'm a believer that the cream will rise to the top. I think, if you put in that time and you work to understand, because I think acting is one of the things that really people don't understand. They don't understand that actors are actually deeply insecure. A lot of them became actors because they didn't like being themselves and they
That's
wanted to be other people.
absolutely, yes.
And that what
I
we
know that from years of being a publicist. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you'll relate to this, that when actors behave badly, it's because they're scared.
absolutely.
It's a terrifying thing to do. You're putting yourself on the line. It's very exposing. And if you're a good actor, you have to risk. And so you have to put it all out there in order to succeed. But you should never be afraid of doing that. I think one of the hard things is to not be afraid of failing and failing big, because the lessons you'll learn, you'll carry for the rest of your life. And I think too often we hold back and we're afraid and we're timid, and I think that stops good work. I think you've got to launch in. I mean, even in our little recording, you could see there are some people who are able to commit, and there's others that can't, and it's perfectly understandable.
Right.
But you just want to grab them by the lapels and say, just give me something. I mean, as a director, I can work with an actor who's doing too much. I can bring that down. If I'm
Right.
getting nothing from an actor, it's hard. I can't get and all the tractors in the world wouldn't drag it out of him, and it's much harder to energize someone and bring the performance out of them. It's been part of the problem with a lot of television actors doing video games, is that they used to neck up acting.
Hmm.
I was taught from a very physical point of view. I was taught to physically inhabit character. Everyone moves in a different way. Everyone carries themselves in a different way. And that means risk. It means putting yourself on the line and making bold choices. And I think as directors and creators and producers, that's what excites us. Jack Nicholson, Sean Penn, they're risky performers.
Hmm.
It's going out, it's on the line,
Down
and
to
it
a
always feels
physical
slightly
level.
dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yes.
feels dangerous, and that's what excites us to watch them.
Yes.
I don't know if I probably got way off topic
No,
now.
no,
I'm
no,
sorry.
not at all. Actually, what's really funny is, I've got a list of reference questions, and you're kind of covering them all. So that's
Oh,
good.
I'm sorry.
No, no, no. That's excellent. It's not about me. It's about you. Well, you know what I think is interesting too, from going back a little bit from my theater days, is that there's also that sense of community, that's there as well, and that support. And if you're looking for the short fix, you miss out on that. And then not only is there that sense of community, but that sense of the community building something together and creating something together, and you miss out on all of that.
I've never felt that as clearly as was when I was doing that kind of theatre for nothing. I mean, when you're on tour with 5 actors in a van, with your set in the back of the van, and you're turning up to community centres day after day and setting up, and you don't know how many people are going to show up, but that's the front lines, man. I mean, that's doing it for real.
Oh
That's
yeah.
that's it's risky, and if you got a good show on your hands, you'll blow people's minds. But the community that creates, and the brotherhood, the fraternity that creates, I'm still friends with all those people, and I maintain those friendships to this day, because that was no one else went through what we went through. That was a
Absolutely.
really unique shared experience. But even now, I've just been asked to direct a giant performance capture project, which I'm starting to move into now, which is bizarre, because you've got the latest technology, which involves the ancient skills of theatre. That's what you need
Absolutely.
to be able to do that stuff. And
Yes.
I find it quite ironic and fun that an art form that is 2,000, 3,000 years old is what really is required for the latest leading edge technology. But I said my approach is collaborative. Everyone in the room is as important as everyone else, and that's the way I work. And if you're not comfortable working that way, then I'm not your guy, because it's something that we're all going to figure out as a team.
Mm.
And that's the way I prefer to work. And I think there is a very strong, that sense of community is very strong in the voice industry because, and I hate this voice acting and acting, if one
All
more
the
interviewer, if
thing.
another interviewer asks me if I do any legitimate acting or real acting,
Wow.
I'll tell you, I've done it all. And voice acting is by far and away the hardest one of the lot because you don't have any of the other tangibles that you have when you're
Yes.
doing anything else.
Back to the neck up.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you really are using your imagination and all of your acting muscles, all those theatrical muscles, to be able to produce what you produce. But the voice community, because it isn't as fear-based, no one's paranoid about how they look. No
Hmm.
one, no one is it's quite cutthroat, the on-camera industry. And I think what's refreshing about the voice industry is we all know how difficult it is to do, and
Yes.
so we all support each other. And the people that I would consider my biggest rivals are my greatest friends.
Mm.
And that is magical. That's how the world should work. It's great. There's enough for everyone.
That's
He's going
right.
to get some of them, and I'm going to get some of the others. And if I can't do something, I'll recommend 5 people who I know will do a cracking job, and they would recommend me too. And that's something that I think is a ray of light in an otherwise quite dark world these days.
Right. It's funny that you say that because I've had the same experience, behind the scenes, live productions, still very cutthroat, non-supportive, but in animation, I have developed some wonderful colleagues and mentors and, people that are extremely, extremely supportive. Why do you
Yeah,
think
generous.
why do you think that is?
Oh, listen, I think when you do what you do in a bunker, it's kind of a unique environment. Those studios are intimidating places, and certainly from the actor's perspective, and this is why I think I'm successful as a director, is because those actors know that I've been in the trenches with them
Hmm.
many, many times. I've done 300 video games and over 700 characters. They know that I know what they're going through, and that I can help them get to where they need to be, and I can identify the things that are holding them back, and that I think you're in the trenches. It's voice directing for a start is a fairly unsung thing to do. People don't
It's
really understand it.
amazing. Explain a little bit about that process, of being in the voice studio on both sides because it's amazing to me because
Yeah,
it's
well,
very technical, but then
yeah,
also very artistic.
sure. I
Yeah,
mean, that's the skill. Is making the
yes,
technical seem as though it's not.
exactly.
And I think from the acting perspective, a voiceover studio is a very intimidating place.
Hmm.
You're in a little box. The room is dead. It feels like it's sucking the life out of you. You've got a big, intimidating microphone in front of you, possibly two. You've got weird egg box shapes all over the walls. It feels very close. You have double pane glass and a room full of people who look like they're talking about what a terrible actor you are, even though they're not.
Right.
And when they're all going,
Yeah. And you can't hear them because there's a big
you don't
glass
know what's going on.
wall.
They're
Yes.
ordering lunch. You're fine, but it's very intimidating.
Yes.
If you're working on a video game, you've by and large never seen the script. You
Mm.
may not remember auditioning for it. You may have to be being asked to play 5, 6 roles. I think the most roles I've done in a game, I'm coming up on over 30 in Elder Scrolls.
Wow.
So you're really walking into a blind situation, and that's a very frightening place to be. So, often as a director at the beginning of a session, I'll spend 10 minutes, and producers are kind of a bit weirded out. I'll spend 10 minutes just saying, "Hey there, man, what's going on? Tell me what's happening." And you're like, "Yeah, oh good, yeah, no, I saw that too." And we'll have a show, we'll chat about the Mandalorian, or we'll talk about some
Right.
whatever it is, just to get them in a happy, comfortable place. Because a happy, comfortable actor is going to be an actor who performs much better, and if I don't know them, I'll spend a little time getting to know them because I need them to trust me. I need them to come with me. And I think for a lot of people, you can make or break a game as a voice director. You really can, because I don't think people realize the kind of hard work that voice acting is or voice directing is until they get in the studio and see it and witness it. And some of the greatest pleasures for me are when writers just go, I had no idea that was in that line. I had no idea, but that's absolutely what I was driving for, and I wasn't getting it. I didn't see it myself. And that's kind of magical. That's when you, as an actor, that's hugely exciting.
Absolutely.
Because I think part of the reason I got in this was taking the 2D and making it 3D. What's more exciting than that? You know, that's an adventure, and making someone's fantasy a reality. But also, it's a good tip for acting too. Is that, you know, you read something and you have your instincts. I think the first question you should ask yourself is, what if it wasn't that? What if it was something completely opposite? And as a director, you've got to kind of come at it from all angles and explore all those possibilities and say, well, not only, you know, when you get a script, often actors will go, blah, 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 my line, blah, 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 my line, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Well, you should be looking at what does the character not say?
Right.
Why do they choose those words? Why do they say what they say when they say it? What do other characters say about that character?
Right.
That's where your clues are. That's where you're mining for the information. I think, you know, for a lot of actors skim text now and don't actually look for the detail. I'm very grateful for my training at RADA, because we really did learn to analyze text.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the real world, if you're out there doing TV, you get sides for a TV show, and you've got an hour before you've got to record it, or you're going in for the meeting, and if you're busy enough, and I'm lucky enough to be that busy, I don't have much time to do my research. So I can take a script and go, okay, beat, there's the switch, there's the hook, there's the funny bit, there's the drama, and there's the cliffhanger. And analyze that and be able to play it quickly. That's part of the skill. And I've had a lot of kids who wanted to be actors, and when I've shown them just how much work is done in analysis,
yes,
you can't see them for dust. They're gone.
Absolutely. Well, I was gonna say to you that, and Aaron has mentioned this to me many a times, and it goes back to what you said earlier, that it's the same, you know. So if someone says, "Oh, I want to be a voice actor," I don't mean to speak for you, but be an actor, you know, you have
Always
to do the same work.
The biggest misnomer, the biggest tragedy that is brought on voice acting is that you walk into a booth and do silly voices. Now, we joke about doing that all the time, but there's a great quote. It's not mine, and I wish it was, but I use it in just about every interview I do. The guy comes up to you and says, "Hey, man, I've been told I got a great voice and I should do voiceover." And I say, "I have a really nice pen, but I'm not a writer." And it's a big difference. Character in voice acting always comes first. You could be doing the goofiest voice in the world, but unless it's rooted in the needs of a character, and for me it comes back to the 8 basic questions that Stanislavski wrote about in An Actor Prepares. That was the first book about acting that was ever handed to me. The second was Uta Hagen, Respect for Acting. That is what it's all about. Without character, it doesn't matter. A voice is empty. It's just. And now, if you're working in animation, you can be required to play a lot of really goofy, strange creatures and animals. And I was in a show called All Hail King Julian, and I mean, one minute you're a lemur, the next minute you're a mud monster, the next minute you're a monkey, the next minute you're and they'll throw all of that at you in one session, right. And you've just got to pull it out of your butt and be on it, right. And make those choices, But if it isn't rooted in character, it's meaningless. It's empty. And so character always comes first. Always comes first. It's not doing voices. Get an acting training. Do improv classes. Get yourself out of yourself. You know, you have no idea what you can do unless you really stretch those boundaries. And too often we set limitations on ourselves and we don't know what we're capable of. And that can happen to me to this day. After 30 years in the business, in a booth, I can find something I never knew I had, because a director has seen something and thrown me that line, and I've just gone, okay, here goes. You know,
right.
Which brings it back to, that's a scary process.
Yes. So I forgot to mention earlier that you performed the voice of William Tell in Califia and the Timeless Sentries, amongst a few other characters, as you just mentioned.
little
Um,
bits and bobs.
yeah, absolutely. How did you get involved with the project? And I say this all the time. I know, but they don't know. So,
Yeah, it was that dreadful woman, Erin Fitzgerald,
shout out
responsible
to
for
Aaron.
so many of the dark decisions I've made in my life.
Mhm.
No, Erin's a lovely, lovely person,
Absolutely.
and you know, she told me that this was a black produced, black written, black conceived project, and that's always interesting to me. Um, it's a difficult subject to talk about, but I mean, I feel like I'm connected because I have a biracial daughter and I was married
Absolutely.
to a black woman. But those kind of projects intrigue me because I just don't think there's enough content out there doing what this needs to do. I mentioned earlier the only thing, one of the few things I've been involved in was the Black Panther series,
Right.
which again was black written and black produced, and I just thought that's as rare as hen's teeth. It just doesn't happen.
Hmm.
And so, if I can lend my support to anything like that, I'll do it. You know, I mean, that's what principally attracted me to the project because there just isn't enough out of that, and those doors have traditionally not been opened.
Right.
And you know, and a lot of black initiated projects end up being bought by white run companies, and that dies. It dies a death, and it kind of kills the cultural fire that was initially lit. And so I know it may sound arrogant, but that's what attracted me. That it was that made me go, oh, I'm listening. So yeah. I mean, it's I just think it's our duty to support.
Right. Absolutely. Well, it's interesting that you say that because William Tell,
I've
he's
gone blurry. 1 second. I'm trying to refocus my camera. It does this sometimes. Come on. Never mind. It's not going to play. Okay, never mind. Well, I'll be slightly blurry. Go on.
okay. I can see you. You're very clear on my
Oh,
end.
good. Good.
Yes. I had to look, right. I had to make sure that it wasn't my
I'm the same way. I'm
right.
like,
Exactly.
can I see me?
William Tell is very obviously, a Northern European character. Why do you think it was important for him to be a part of, this story? And I know we've only told a portion of the story, but why do you think it was
I
important?
don't believe I can answer that question. I think that's my question to you.
Well, it goes back to what I said earlier about that, that in order for us to survive and in order for us to um, affect change, we've got to do it together.
Inclusively.
Exactly. And that's on both sides. And that's on both sides. And I think that too, when people learn to work together, that leaves more room for tolerance and understanding.
Be not afraid.
Absolutely. And I also like the fact that, we just know, William Tell, that's the classic story of, oh, he shot an apple, off of his son's head. But what we don't know is it was kind of a
An
stop.
act of extreme rebellion.
Exactly. And it was a stop and frisk.
Yeah.
I mean, if everybody looks the same in a place, and then it becomes more about classism, you know. And so that was interesting to me. And then that stop and frisk, led to a revolution, And so that said to me that that's someone with blonde hair and blue eyes, which is how the character was originally created, who would be able to relate to people from diverse backgrounds. So
Yeah.
it made sense. It just
Yeah.
made, yes.
Yeah, and I come from Europe. There are few European nations that will identify like with the black population of America than the Irish and the
Hmm.
Scottish, both of whom lived under tremendous oppression from the English, largely because of race.
Right,
Even if it was a similarly coloured race,
right,
but that was very, very real. And in the same way that I think England as a country, its role has had to severely change, just like Italy's did after the fall of the Roman Empire, and Britain's had to do after the fall of the British Empire. Their legacy we left was pretty ugly, and we have a responsibility to a lot of those African nations that we raped
mm,
and pillaged and left dictators in shape of. One of my passions is travel, and when I was doing theatre, that's what I would do. I would stick a pin in the map, and I travelled extensively across southern Africa, and I saw Mugabe speak in Zimbabwe. I visited Mozambique, Namibia, and Botswana, and I was very aware of just how badly you can screw up a country and walk away. And often those people were like, God, I wish the British were here because the oppressor that had become even worse, if you can believe it. In India, I'd hear that all the time. So they'd say, well, at least the trains rang on time when the British were here. And you'd be like, no, that's not quite the point. But, I think there is a responsibility for us to be reaching out and to being, and I was actually quite honored to be asked to be included in something like that. I think it is a privilege, and I think it is a privilege to be able to speak to that message. And so I'm very grateful to you for that.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you for lending your vast resume and talent, to us. I
Just
appreciate
one foot in front of the other, my friend.
absolutely. On a
Keep watching.
on a fun note, I noticed something when we were laying down the tracks for episode 2. That you did with Mongor, the big lizard gorilla, and it worked so perfectly with the visuals that Sean Hawkins, our key animator, that he created, and it was so subtle, but it was perfect. That when he was chasing, down the centuries and the Griffin goddess, appears, I heard it in your voice, that you turned and looked and said, like, what's going on? And that it was just so subtle, but the timing just worked so perfectly, even without having the visual when you were doing the voice. It was
Yeah.
and it was something so small.
I credit a lot of that to Blizzard. I mean, I spend a lot of my time at Blizzard. We spend as a director there and as an actor. Blizzard is very good at, in Blizzard you have all these categories of characters: orcs and tauren, who are like bull-like creatures, and wargren, who are wolf-like creatures, and elves and goblins and gnomes and fairies, and they're all these magical, fantastical creatures. The job of the director so often is to make those relate to each other in human terms.
Mm-hmm.
And a writer can sort of offer that, but then you have to take that further to really make those actors connect, so that even if you're playing a big orc, you have that gravitas, but it doesn't mean you're without feeling. And so, those monsters have feelings too.
Absolutely, and
And
reactions, right?
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. If you have a dog, you know that it makes different noises for different circumstances.
absolutely. Or with a small infant.
Yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
it's very, very true. I think
Or a president of the United States, same noises.
um, um, Orange Julius. No, I'm just fine. No.
Yes, I don't know who you mean. The Cheeto Benito? I don't know who you're talking
about. To kind of cover politics a little bit more, but from a standpoint of using Califia and the Timeless Sentries as a reference, we said earlier that the love of a child was what really kind of sparked William Tell into starting unconsciously a revolution. And we talked earlier, your father. How has being a father made you want to make a difference through your art, either consciously or subconsciously, because you're a father?
Well, it starts fairly flippantly, and I think it's really good for actors to have children, because the second you have a kid, it's not really about you anymore.
Mm.
And acting can be a very self-absorbing exercise. And I don't think enough actors learn early enough that is kind of not the point. It's not, you've got to open yourself up. And I think having a kid really makes you realize that as a storyteller, you have a different responsibility, and that if you start seeing stories through their eyes with that wonderful openness and naivete, it changes your perspective on things. There's also the benefit of just pure imagination. The fact that you can give a kid a cardboard box, tell it it's a rocket ship, and you can walk away for 3 hours,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a rocket ship. That kid is committed, and as an actor, you need that sense of play and imagination to be able to do what you do. But then being the father of, like I said before, being a father of a biracial child in America, that's, there's some scary shit going on out there.
Absolutely.
And when her mother, I mean, she's my ex-wife. I'm very happily divorced.
Hmm.
But when she's frightened of driving home at night, there's a problem, especially in California. And not especially in California, anywhere. But you expect California to be more progressive. It's not
We
necessarily.
expect
People are
that.
just as frightened. People are just as scared. And I've witnessed it firsthand, the driving while black thing. And that's something that has to fundamentally change if this country is going to survive as a democracy. And I do think that the artists and the politicians hate us saying this, but I do think as artists we have that responsibility to tell those stories and to take them out there and show them. And I have responsibility for my kid to say to her, I did the best I could. I did what I could to help. I can support. I'm lucky. I can financially support causes that I believe in. I can keep her aware and safe and open and as educated as possible to what is out there. And whatever I can do to hopefully make some difference and use any kind of influence for good, I'm not arrogant enough to think it's going to have any big sway, but I'll just do what I can. I think it does change your perspective, and it's a different kind of responsibility. If you take it that way, I mean, you have the choice not to. My parents were in a very different place, in a very different era, in a very different world.
Right.
I've been lucky to be exposed to a range of things that I wasn't anywhere else in the world, and therefore, I don't think you can just walk away from that stuff. I think you have to take it seriously, and I think you have to take it as a moral duty to do what you can,
On a lighter note, can
Yeah,
you
please, because that was
can
getting heavy.
can you do a favor for me?
All right.
And I know you're not a performing seal, although I've got the sardine waiting. um,
Arr, arr.
right.
The
Bear,
other thing I hate is actors who publicize games that they're in.
right.
That kind of crass self-publication is just, there's no place for it. I despise it.
Right, right. Product placement. I hope everybody caught that with the lighting.
I don't know what you mean.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Plausible deniability. Let's see here. Bear Trap. Do you remember Bear Trap? And he was one of the Moravians, which were these hybrid human animals.
Yeah.
Had a fight scene with one of the characters, and came out and said, "Bear Trap is unimpressed," and
Yes.
you did that type of a voice for him. But it's really funny, and when it goes to full animation, I will ask for this. I always Bear Trap, and the way he's drawn, and I don't know if people notice this, but it's an Elvis jumpsuit that he's wearing, that he's kind of busted out of, and then so it makes you wonder, is this Elvis? And so the favor that I'm going to ask is,
Oh no.
yes, you know what's coming.
I can't remember what I did though.
No,
Have
but I'm
fun.
gonna ask you, what would the voice of Elvis sound like if he were a bear?
That's a ridiculous proposition.
We're in a ridiculous industry.
Thank you very much.
That's,
Was the one for the money too virtual? Something like that.
that's pretty good. That's pretty good, and that adds a whole other level of humor to an already very ridiculous character.
Folks
So,
at home, I feel like I've just been strong-armed into a casting session I knew nothing about.
I'm full of surprises. I'm a little confused.
Clearly.
So.
Thank you, Mr. Underhand.
Yeah.
I'm even Underwood.
Wait a minute, I've been called a lot worse.
Me too.
Just don't call me late for a paycheck. Yes. So what's next for JB Blanc? What is next for you? What's coming up?
Well, we're gonna be starting to shoot season 3 of Barry, which I'm very excited about. It's a show on HBO that's been highly awarded, and I'm very, very lucky to be a part of that and excited about that. My directing career is moving in different directions. I'm about to start directing on a very big performance capture project, as I mentioned, and that's going to be an exciting new twist. And then I'm going to be doing everything I can to make sure we retain some sanity in this country,
Mm,
and move on from what has been, I think, a deeply painful and scarring and damaging 4 years.
absolutely.
Um,
And I
and,
think
I,
we need to say
and
that as
without
well.
insulting the other side, I mean, I think we have to reach out and understand what the hell happened. There's a lot of work for, I think, our side of the world to try and figure out what the hell is going on and why there's such dissatisfaction when ultimately we're all in the same pile of soup. And we should be looking after each other a little bit more. And I think, we've all got to do what we can to restore that humanity that I think America represented for such a long time. It was always such a welcoming place, such a warm and loving place, and that's not what I'm seeing now, and that worries me greatly. So yeah, there are professional commitments. There's a lot of stuff I want to do, but I think I don't think any of us can be unaffected by what's happened and how we have to move forward. So it's going to be an interesting time. I hope it's not going to be a extremely combustive time. It is my belief that good will prevail, and I think this fella is going to have to admit that he lost, and well, I hate being a loser. I'm gonna have to go, even if I don't put me in jail. Um, the only reason we have so many cases of corona is because we're doing the testing. And the only reason Joe Biden is winning the election is because they're counting the votes. Stop the count. Stop counting the votes. It'll go away. Donald Trump will disappear. You'll see the warm weather will come, and it'll be like a miracle. He'll be gone.
Okay, everyone, we have been talking to the prolific, the talented, and the youthful JB Blanc.
You can come again.
Where can we find you across social media, Mr. Blanc?
I have a fan page on Facebook. My Twitter handle is at the JB Blanc, only because someone had stolen it, because that's what happens. I'm on Instagram as the JB Blanc as well, so I'm around. You don't have to look far. I'm around.
All right, very cool. And you guys continue to please follow, share, and like at Califia Comics. Episode 4 is coming very, very soon, and I hope you guys all check it out. JB Blanc, thank you again.